What does it feel like to be a New York Met these days, especially at Citi Field?
It's an absolute blast.
New York Mets is the only team I know. I'm super happy to be playing for these fans. New York is my home.
I love this team last year. Can't wait to start another season.
This organization took a gigantic step forward last year, wanting to be part of this vision moving forward.
A grand slam for
Brains are sick.
Lindor homers from both sides of the plate. She is gone! Do you believe this? McNeil's got his magic wand back. Max Scherzer picks up his 200th victory. Unbelievable! This team, he struck him out, and the ball game is over. As the Mets no-hit the Philly.
They're chanting that man's name.
Montana with his arms raised over his head. It's the month of Escobar! The catch of the year for Brandon Nimmo!
Batting champ Jeff McNeil.
What an inning by the Mets.
And the Mets walk it off. Absolutely unbelievable.
This is as crazy a ninth inning as we've seen in forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned into the very first episode of the 2023 MLB season of the Metropolitan Report. My name is Alfred Jr., and we are a proud member of the Grid Network, which is a phenomenal network of sports podcasts and content. And here on this podcast, we cover any and everything New York Mets. For those of you who were familiar with us when we were audio only on Apple Music and Spotify during the 2021 season, welcome. For those of you who have never heard the Metropolitan Report, or in this case seen it, because we're doing video this season, as you guys can see, welcome. And on this podcast, we're going to talk about any and everything New York Mets, as I said. And spring training is underway. Baseball is in the air, full swing. The Mets have reported to Port St. Lucie, Florida. And just a little recap of 2022. 2022 was the best New York Mets season in a long time. First time since 2016 that the ball club qualified for the postseason. In 2022, the New York Mets had a record of 101 wins, 61 losses, tied for first, technically second due to a tiebreaker with the Atlanta Braves. However, the Mets were eliminated in the wild card round of the playoffs by the San Diego Padres, 2-1 in that series. So high expectations for the Mets. The Mets, owned by Steve Cohen, have done a lot. We're going to talk about some acquisitions. We're also going to talk about some losses here in this spring training season preview episode. But the first things first, departures. The New York Mets no longer have Jacob deGrom. He signed as a free agent and went to the Texas Rangers. Dominic Smith also departed the club. He went to the Washington Nationals. Chris Bassett went to the Toronto Blue Jays. Taijuan Walker went to the rival Philadelphia Phillies. So a couple of losses. However, we've got some big acquisitions that I'm going to talk about in this show. Also in this program, we're going to talk about the youngsters, the baby Mets, as I like to call them, Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, and Francisco Alvarez, how they did last season and where they figure into the plans for the team coming into 2023 and what I think should happen amongst those three young stars. But first off, again, I'm excited for the 2023 New York Mets season. I'll be at approximately 45 of those games at Citi Field this year, covering the Mets, and I'm very excited. You can see I got my nice little Mets t-shirt on here in this edition of the Metropolitan Report. And Steve Cohen spared no expense in trying to elevate this team. There are 4 acquisitions that he made. Now, he made more than 4 acquisitions, don't get me wrong. However, there are 4 that I think are going to be key to this team, and we'll go through them here. The first acquisition, of course, you lose a pitcher like Jacob deGrom. So what does Steve Cohen and the front office go out and do? Well, they go ahead and sign Justin Verlander to a 2-year deal. Now, a lot of people who are not Met fans, not inside the circle, a lot of outsiders, they said, oh, well, this guy, he's over the age of 40. Why would you go and sign him? Well, I'll tell you why. Justin Verlander is still an impact player despite his age. In 2022, he was the American League Cy Young Award winner in his season with the Houston Astros last season. Yes, he is coming off of a Cy Young season. Very rare you see a Cy Young winner who wins the Cy Young and then goes to a different team the next season. The last person that comes to mind is R.A. Dickey, who ironically played for us. Justin Verlander, let's go over his stats from 2022 with the Houston Astros. Also, not only did he win the Cy Young, he's also coming off of a World Series championship. So he had a pretty great 2022, winning the Cy Young as well as a World Series ring. Last season, Justin Verlander, in addition to winning the Cy Young, went 18-4 with a 1.75 ERA, 185 strikeouts to 29 walks in 175 innings pitched. I like this signing a lot. Again, you lose a guy like Jacob deGrom, who has an injury history. Each of the last 2 seasons, he's been pretty banged up. In the last 3 seasons, actually, he's missed more time and spent more time on the injured list than he has on the pitching mound. But you double back with a guy who's fresh off of a Cy Young in a World Series. One thing that this team needs is a guy who knows how to win a World Series and has a championship experience. Yes, the Mets have Francisco Lindor, who played in a World Series, but Verlander, most recently, the season that just passed, won the World Series, as I said. Justin Verlander proving that age is nothing but a number for him, still feeling sharp. And, it's what more can I say? It's Justin Verlander, 18 wins and only 4 losses. Justin Verlander, 185 strikeouts to 29 walks. That's a heck of a ratio. Still going strong. He was a workhorse in 2022, of course, 175 innings pitched. And of course, not only did he make it to a regular season, but the Astros won the whole thing. So he played postseason baseball well into October. I have high expectations for Justin Verlander, and it's going to be pretty solid having him part of the ball club. He's obviously going to be a co-ace, as I like to call it. Typically, a team has one ace, but partnered up with his former teammate again, Max Scherzer. They were teammates in Detroit with the Tigers a decade ago, and they're reunited now on the same pitching staff. Well, Justin Verlander is going to be a guy. He's going to bolster this pitching staff. Of course, the pitching staff we'll get to in a moment, but Justin Verlander, very good signing. Again, you lose an ace and a once-in-a-generational talent like deGrom, and you bring in another ace and generational talent in Verlander again. deGrom's a little bit younger. However, Verlander has the better upside, in my opinion, only because Verlander does not have the injury history that deGrom had, despite missing the 2021 season for Justin Verlander. Another key acquisition, I feel, is going to pay dividends for the Mets. Kodai Senga. For those of you who don't follow Japanese baseball, you might be saying, who? Well, Kodai Senga, last season in Nippon Professional Baseball, which is the Japanese league, Senga went 11-6 with a 1.94 ERA, 156 strikeouts in 27 walks. He pitched 144 innings in Japan last season. Now, however, for those of you who have been keeping up with the Mets spring training, and I'll fill you in right now if you haven't, Kodai Senga has come out to the media. He did have a media day in spring training, and he did say that he has to get used to the steepness of the mound and the distance between the plate and the mound in Major League Baseball. Why is that a challenge for him? Because for those of you who don't know, in the Japanese league, they play in smaller stadiums and smaller fields. The mound is a little bit more closer to the ground, and it's a little bit closer to the plate. However, Senga will get extensive work in spring training. He's already had a couple of bullpen sessions, but Kodai Senga has pretty much a month and some change to get used to it. The season starts at the end of March. We're in mid to late February right now. I believe Senga will adjust. My only concern with Kodai Senga coming from the Japanese league, and obviously this was no issue for Shohei Ohtani and greats like Hideo Nomo, they get used to the major leagues, but in Japan, again, smaller fields, smaller stadiums. Totally different game out there, different level of competition. Will he end up like a Shohei Ohtani or a Hideo Nomo, or will he go the way of a Tomo Oka or a Hideki Irabu? We don't know yet, but the amount of money that he was paid, and he was a prize free agent. A lot of teams wanted Senga. He chose to come to Flushing. So that remains to be seen. But again, impressive numbers, 11-6 and a 1.94 ERA. It's similar to Verlander, who had a crazy strikeout to walks ratio last year in Japan, as you can see on the graphic. Senga, 156 Ks, 27 walks. The third acquisition, who I think is going to pay dividends, this move was made to strengthen the bullpen. David Robertson, who last season split time between the Cubs and the Phillies. He started the season last year with the Cubs, traded at the deadline to the Phillies. Phillies acquired him to help them with their playoff run. They eventually did reach the World Series, but fell to the Astros. Robertson combined last season between the two clubs. He went 4-3, 2.40 ERA, 81 strikeouts, 35 walks, and 63 innings pitched. David Robertson, for many years, or the last several years, I should say, has been a guy who's either been the closer or somebody that you get to bolster the bullpen. Now, last season, the Mets bullpen in the middle was kind of shaky when it came to guys such as Michael Givens, Seth Lugo. Guys were not consistent. The only consistency was Edwin Diaz, and from the middle to the end of the season, Adam Ottavino. That was it. Lugo and Givens no longer here. Robertson, solid pitcher for the last couple of seasons. The former Yankee, former Cub, former Philly. He's been pretty solid in his career. And for a reliever, 2.40 ERA. I'll take that any day of the week. 63 innings pitched, 81 Ks in 63 innings. He'll be a good option for the bullpen to complement Ottavino and, of course, Edwin Diaz. So I'm very excited to see the production of Robertson in a Mets uniform. And then the fourth acquisition, who I think is going to be key. And now I've only talked about pitching so far, but now we're going to go to a position player. A lot of people may call me crazy for thinking this, but Tommy Pham, who last season split time between the Cincinnati Reds and the Boston Red Sox. I also think Tommy Pham is going to pay dividends in Flushing. Last season between the two clubs, he had a 236 average, 17 home runs, 63 RBIs. He had 8 stolen bases in 554 at-bats with an OPS of 686. He is a career 259 hitter. Now, Tommy Pham is not going to be somebody who's going to see playing time every day, or even maybe not on a regular basis. However, Tommy Pham is a good fit for this Mets team because he provides depth, a decent bench bat. So Tommy Pham, he's going to be a platoon guy, but he's going to be a key platoon guy. And I'm very excited to see what he can bring to Flushing. Of course, he's had stops in San Diego. He's had stops in St. Louis, Tampa Bay, and he's been productive everywhere he's gone. There's a reason why last season he was a commodity at the trade deadline. Despite going from one losing team to another, he still was an acquisition at the trade deadline. Guys who are not good players are not sought after during the deadline at all, historically. So, again, Tommy Pham, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Tommy Pham can do. But like I said at the beginning of the program, expectations are very, very high for this New York Mets team. So high, in fact, that when the manager Buck Showalter, who's in his second year as the skipper for the Mets, of course, Showalter last season named the manager of the year by the Associated Press. He was asked, what are the goals for this season? And this is what he had to say. We'll roll the footage.
The goal coming out of spring training is to win the division. It was last year. And it was, and we tied for it last year. And then some tiebreaker didn't put us there. So, that's the goal. We just got through we kept standings all year last year in the advance room. And we've already got the 5 rosters in the in the team room. Yeah, that's what we're competing against, 4 other teams initially. And trying to figure out a way to be better than them. It's going to be hard. They've done some really quality things this offseason.
So that's the goal. Win the division. And you heard what he said initially. There's only 4 teams that can compete, that the Mets are competing with. Who are those 4 teams? If you don't know, they're in the NL East. Miami Marlins, Philadelphia Phillies, of course, the Atlanta Braves, who are the top dog in the division, it seems, almost every year, and the cellar-dwelling, forever rebuilding Washington Nationals. Well, all right, folks, we're going to take a commercial break really quick. When we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about the young Mets. Of course, Brett Baty, Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez, and where they're going to slot in 2023. You're watching the Metropolitan Report or listening to it, however you're taking in the program, and we'll be right back.
Hey, what's up, guys? Pete Alonso here from the New York Mets, and I'm here with Alfred, and I just want to say thank you so much to all you guys for listening to the Metropolitan Report. It's a really awesome show. You got some great insight on Mets baseball, and it's a great place where Mets baseball is talked about, and we got a lot of really fun stuff coming up this year, and a lot of really great things coming from this team in the clubhouse, and I'm really, really excited to keep the ball rolling, and it's been such a fun season, and I'm really thankful for everybody coming out to the ballpark and supporting us, and it's just been absolutely tremendous. So thank everybody for listening to the Metropolitan Report, and Alfred, keep doing your thing, and as always, LFGM.
I got it! New York Mets Ticket Center. This is Brandon.
Section 139? Yeah, you can see my hair from there.
お化けフォークはただの球種だからお化けじゃないよ。
Got it. Yeah, it's not a real ghost.
It's not a ghost!
Now, you hang up.
Your tickets are confirmed. Yes, they're closer.
All right, folks, we are back on the Metropolitan Report. I am Alfred Parsar Jr. Here, we are a proud member of the Grid Network. And one interesting dynamic for this spring training this year, 2023, there are 3 young players that, Met fans and even baseball purists would like to see play. And all 3 of them got cups of coffee in the majors last season. Of course, I'm talking about Brett Baty, Mark Vientos, and Francisco Alvarez. Each of them had a brief spell at the major league level last season. The Mets, they have a lot of belief in these 3 youngsters. Of course, Brett Baty was a first round pick. Alvarez turned heads when he was in Single A Brooklyn with the Cyclones and Double A Binghamton. Of course, he had that showing in the 2021 Futures game, All-Star Weekend, that weekend where he hit that home run shot in Coors Field, which was no easy feat in the only at bat of the game that he had. And then, of course, there's Vientos, who is the sleeper out of the 3. Sleeper meaning, everybody talks about Baty, everybody talks about Alvarez and this prolific bat that he has, but Vientos is kind of the fundamental guy. Well, let's go over some numbers. So last season, Brett Baty, again, all 3 of these guys had cups of coffee. For those of you who don't know, cups of coffee is baseball lingo for a brief stint. Very small sample size, if you will. Brett Baty last season in 38 at-bats, he hit 184 for his average with 2 home runs, 5 RBI. Mark Vientos, in his brief stint with the Mets at the major league level, 36 at-bats, average of 167, 1 home run, 3 RBI. And Francisco Alvarez, 12 at-bats, he hit 167, and his only base hit was a solo home run, 1 home run, 1 RBI in Citi Field last season. Now, I've been asked, and I've seen a lot of things online about what should the Mets do. Here's my opinion, folks. And again, this is just my opinion. If you agree, please leave comments in the comment section. If you disagree, leave comment in the comment section. I would love to see and hear all of your opinions on this. But if I'm Buck Showalter and I'm running camp, depending on how they do, of course, but everything that I'm about to describe is a hypothetical in an ideal world. If I'm Buck, I'm gonna have Beatty start the season in the majors. I'll tell you why. You look at this bench for the Mets, right? We have the aforementioned Tommy Pham, who we spoke about before the commercial break. You have a spare catcher spot because Tomas Nido and Omar Narvaez, who's coming over from the Brewers, neither guy's an everyday catcher. You're at least going to have one of them every day on the bench. So that's two. The third bench guy, and this is going to be interesting because if you look at the Mets lineup, depending on who's pitching, either Daniel Vogelback or Darren Ruff, one of the two are always going to be on the bench. If there's a righty pitching, then Vogelback will be in the lineup. If it's a lefty pitching, then you're going to have Ruff. And now, granted, Darren Ruff did have his struggles last season. Flushing came over in the J.D. Davis trade at the trade deadline. But one of those two guys is always going to be on the bench. I would give the last bench spot to Beatty. Why? Because Eduardo Escobar, let's face it, Eduardo Escobar, this is a contract year for him. I'm not certain that he will play well enough to get an offer to come back, or if he'll even be on the team at the trade deadline, depending on what happens, because a lot of things can happen between now and the trade deadline this summer. But I'm going to assume that Escobar is going to play the mentor role as much as he can. Of course, Brett Beatty, a third baseman by trade. He has played a little bit of left field, but primarily a third baseman. Escobar is a great guy to learn from. Escobar is a former All-Star. He made the All-Star team as a member of the Diamondbacks a couple years back. So Escobar is going to be a good guy to learn from. Beatty was called up because Escobar was injured last season, and he spelled Escobar while Escobar was rehabbing his injury. Then Beatty, of course, hurt his thumb, and that led to Vientos getting called up. But Beatty has proven that he can come through in important situations. Of course, the 2 home runs, his first ever at bat on the second pitch he ever saw was a home run. He hit that in Truist Park in Atlanta against the Braves. I'll never forget it. But Beatty seems to be the golden child out of the three prospects. Again, out of the three, as of right now, Brett Beatty has the greatest upside. A lot of people rant and rave about Alvarez's offense, which I'll get to in a second. But Beatty also is a very defensive-minded player. From studying his film in the minors, his defensive acumen is very good at third base, especially because the shift is now outlawed in the infield for the 2023 season. You're going to need a defensive-minded third baseman going forward. And Brett Beatty, he may not pan out to be David Wright, or he could be better than David Wright. Of course, David Wright, arguably the greatest third baseman in Mets franchise history. But Brett Beatty, they have a lot of promise in that young man. All right, now we move to Francisco Alvarez. Alvarez, again, the scouts are all impressed with his offense, his bat. However, the biggest knock on Alvarez is his defense, which is why he should start the season in AAA Syracuse. Last season, there was talk of bringing up Alvarez and just having him DH. Now, that's all good and well because the DH is universal now in the National League. And you have guys like Ellis Burks and David Ortiz and Edgar Martinez who have all made their name from being designated hitters. Of course, Ortiz and Martinez are Hall of Famers. Guys like Jim Thome, as they got older, dangerous designated hitters. However, Alvarez is a catcher. Alvarez is figured into plans with the big league club going forward. Now, Tomas Nido, again, no disrespect to Nido, no disrespect to Narvaez. Neither man is an everyday catcher. You want a young prospect like Alvarez, he's not even 20 yet, to be an everyday catcher. That a guy with a prolific bat like that, of course, that's all well and good, but at some point he's going to have to get behind the plate. And if he can't block and call games at the major league level, then, you might as well try to teach him to play first base. Because his defense is not where it should be, he should start in AAA this season. Not to mention, and I know 12 at bats is only a small sample size, but there were key at bats that he had within those 12. One is an example when the Mets visited the Atlanta Braves going down the stretch. That actually cost the Mets their first place finish last season, where Alvarez came to the plate with the bases loaded, struck out on 3 pitches. He's got to go back to the. It's easy to hit home runs in a game where you're down 6-1 in the 8th inning and smash home runs. It's a different thing when you're in a playoff race trying to hold on to first place or catch first place, and you've got all the pressure on you. But my knock on Alvarez is just the defense and the lack of a clutch gene. Now, I know he's young. He's 19 years old. He may get the clutch gene, but you got to work on that defense because, again, Narvaez is on a 2-year deal, and Nito, while his defense is great, he's not the greatest bat in the world. So Alvarez should start in AAA. And as for Vientos, this is the toss-up because, again, Vientos, defensively, very fundamentally sound. His bat is average. He's a contact hitter. He's never going to be a guy who's going to get he's never gonna be the cleanup guy. He's never gonna be the power guy. He's a guy, he makes your lineup. He's gonna bat 7th, 8th, or 9th in the bottom third of the order. Again, very, very fundamentally sound is Vientos. I think he's gonna start the season in AAA because there's just no room for him at the major league level. Of course, you got 26 guys to start the season. You got position guys. You want ideally about four bench guys. About 4 bench guys. You got 9 guys in the lineup, 4 on the bench, and then the rest of the pitching staff and the bullpen. There's just no room for him. Let him go to Syracuse and learn and grow and develop. But those are my thoughts on Beatty, Vientos, and Alvarez. Of course, people are also talking about Ronnie Mauricio. And again, now Ronnie Mauricio, don't get me wrong, he was named the MVP of the Dominican League, the Dominican Winter League, where guys go to stay warm. But he's a switch-hitting shortstop. We have a switch-hitting shortstop for another 8 years. Talk about, of course, Francisco Lindor. And it's just a case of no room for Mauricio. Now, can you teach him another position? Yeah, but where would he fit? Again, the infield's covered because you have Pete at first, or he could switch off with Bogey at the DH if he needs to. McNeil's probably going to be at second. Lindor at short, Escobar third. And then the outfield is covered. Marte is probably going to be in right again. Nimmo just signed that huge extension. He'll be in center field. And Canna is going to be in left. So not a lot of room. The last point I'm going to touch on before I get out of here for this inaugural program on the Metropolitan Report for the 2023 season. Question marks in camp. What do I mean by question marks? There are a couple of guys who I'm not entirely too sure if they're going to make the team or what they're going to bring to the table. But we'll start with the first guy, Joey Lucchesi. So Joey Lucchesi is a starting pitcher that we signed prior to the 2021 season. He is the master of the curve, as he likes to call it. That's a changeup mixed with a curveball that only Lucchesi has been known to throw. Now, Joey Lucchesi missed all of last year. He got hurt in 2021. Had to end up having Tommy John. He tore his UCL in his elbow and missed all of last season rehabbing. He will be in camp this spring training season. For his career, he's 19-24 in 70 games, 4.24 ERA with 349 strikeouts in 337 2/3 innings. The last time he saw action at the major league level, again, was 2021. He went 1-4 in 11 starts with a 4.46 ERA. And again, we don't know what we're going to see from Lucchesi. He had, again, Tommy John surgery, which is not an easy surgery to come back from. Of course, some guys, Jacob deGrom had Tommy John in 2015 or 2014, I'm sorry. And he came back and became one of the greatest pitchers the franchise ever saw. But again, Lucchesi, nobody knows what to expect. Again, he hasn't pitched since mid 2021, so there's no telling what Joey Lucchesi is going to bring to the table. But it's going to be very interesting to see if Joey Lucchesi can either make the club out of spring training at the major league level, which I don't think will happen. I probably think he starts the season in Syracuse just to kind of like a rehab thing, because he has not. This spring training coming up will be the first time that he's going to be throwing in game situations. And again, I don't know what 2023 will hold for him. I think he should start in the minors. I think he will start in the minors, and then they'll work him back to the major league roster. Lucchesi could be a spot starter, a sixth guy in the rotation if there's an emergency or an injury or a doubleheader or what have you. The other guy who the Mets have brought in, or is going to be a Mets camp this spring, is John Curtis. John Curtis is a reliever. Curtis did not play in 2021. 2022, I'm sorry. He last played in 2021. Curtis as well, rehabbing an injury. The last season he played was 2021, where he split time between the Miami Marlins and Milwaukee Brewers. In that season, not really anything to write home about. Career 3.63 ERA, 87 strikeouts and 86 2/3 innings. So he's not a high strikeout pitcher. He did go 3-1 in 2021. But he did have, when he had a stint in Milwaukee where he made 6 appearances with a 12.46 ERA. He's rehabbing an injury. And John Curtis, again, just like Lucchesi, missed all of last season rehabbing. This spring will also be the first time he's pitching in competitive game situations. So Curtis was signed prior to last season. So he was signed before 2022. Heading into that season, but the Mets signed him with the expectation that he would miss the entire 2022 season. A move similar to like what the NBA's Brooklyn Nets did when they signed Kevin Durant. He missed his whole first season recovering from a catastrophic Achilles injury. So it'll be interesting to see what Lucchesi and Curtis do. I think Curtis also will start or should start his season in Syracuse. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our inaugural Metropolitan Report. I know we didn't touch on everything in this episode, but it's spring training. It's early. We haven't even had a spring training game yet. The Mets will open spring training this Saturday, February 25th, when they play the Miami Marlins at 6:05 p.m. Eastern time. When we come back, we'll talk about that game and the games that happen between now and our next episode next week. And then we'll also go through the roster, and we'll also preview the World Baseball Classic and the Mets that are going to leave, that are in camp now, that are going to leave camp to go play for their countries in the 2023 World Baseball Classic. Once again, I am Alfred Parsar Jr. This has been the Metropolitan Report. You can follow us on Instagram at _Metropolitan_report. Same thing for Twitter. And don't forget to follow the Grid Network. That's Grid spelled GRYD. The Grid Network on Instagram and Twitter, all one word. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel so good to be back. Thank you for all my supporters who have come back after our hiatus last year. And I've said everything there is to say. And the only thing left to say is, let's go Mets.